We would. Yes, we would. We can't keep the Lieutenant Governor waiting. She has things to do. Good afternoon, everyone. We hope you are having an opportunity to enjoy some parts of the summer and are having a wonderful day. As we begin to wind down the month of August and our minds turn to going back to school, the 2020 elections, and of course, what's always in the forefront of our mind, COVID-19. Today, all things women, we are so happy to have a special edition of YWLIVE Lunch and Learn with Lieutenant Governor for the state of Connecticut, Lieutenant Governor Susan Bysiewicz. Lieutenant Governor Bysiewicz is currently serving her first term as Lieutenant Governor, but she's no stranger to advocating for Connecticut residents, small businesses across the state. She served as Secretary of State from 1999 to 2011, helped thousands of businesses grow, registered voters, cutting bureaucratic red tape. We always love cutting bureaucratic red tape, and ensuring the election process was fair for everyone. Prior to serving as Secretary of the state, Susan was a member of the Connecticut House of Representatives, serving the towns of Middletown, Middlefield, and Durham. Among her legislative victories, she spearheaded the ban of drive-through mastectomies to ensure that women were being treated for breast cancer and receiving the proper care. Lieutenant Governor Bysiewicz was born and raised in Connecticut, the proud granddaughter of immigrants from Poland and Greece with nothing but hopes for a better future. And Susan continues to fight for a better future for all Connecticut residents. Lieutenant Governor Bysiewicz, to YWLIVE Lunch and Learn. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much.
Before we get into, I guess, our deeper subjects, I want to ask you a question I tend to ask everyone, particularly since we've been 6 months or more into COVID-19. And that's like how you and your family are faring. And also, what kind of conversation has it made for breakfast and dinner tables with this opportunity to perhaps spend some additional time together?
You know, I have to say that I grew up on a farm, and I love to cook. So we've enjoyed having our garden in our backyard and doing, I would say, a lot more cooking than we usually do. So that's been such a pleasure. What I've missed, my husband and I have 3 children, and our son lives with us in Middletown. But our daughters are in New York. One works at Google, one works at a large advertising agency, and they've been fortunate in that they've been able to work from home. But we've missed them. We finally got to see them in person for my husband's birthday at the beginning of August. So that was a big treat, because, and I know a lot of families are like this. They have family members that they regularly see during the summertime, people traveling. And so I have to say, seeing our daughters is something that we've really missed. We've done a lot of FaceTime and phone calls, but it's not the same.
Not the same. I
love Zoom, but it's not the same.
It's not. It is not. But of course, even though those loved ones that we're not able to see with the regularity that we'd like to, at least we take some comfort in knowing that they are healthy and we have some way of communicating. But I feel your pain. I can't see anybody anywhere because everybody is on the list. So either there would be quarantining on this end or quarantining on that end. So just trying to be safe.
Yes.
So you've been in public service and private practice for more than 20 years. We see you in the media, traveling all over the state, talking with various constituent groups, not to mention your time presiding over the state Senate. Can you tell us what is your day like? What's a typical day? When does it start and does it end?
So I have a staff member that you can't see because he's on the other side of the computer. You ask that question and he's shaking his head because there is no typical day in my life. And I guess when we were in normal times prior to March 15th, when the state capitol closed down, you would find me during the legislative session presiding over the state Senate. It's one of the duties that I have as Lieutenant Governor that's very similar to what the Vice President does when he or she presides over the US Senate. That's what I do. I run the debate. Our legislative session was cut short. All the legislators went home. The governor and I continued to come to the Capitol and work with our staff. It's just that there are very few people here. It's closed to the public. But we're here because we have platforms so that the governor can do his daily briefing, or I can conduct public meetings and have CTN cover it so that the public can see and hear some of the work that we're doing. I have traveled across the state during the pandemic. And, you know, for example, when we were in the midst of the huge spike that we had, when we had several thousand people in the hospital, the governor and I visited COVID-19 units and saw the very brave people in our healthcare profession that were working with people who are on ventilators or very, very ill. And I just have to say that was incredibly inspiring. And on any given day, you can find me knocking on doors in Waterbury or Bridgeport or Hartford to encourage people to answer the census. By the way, if anybody out there who's listening or watching hasn't done theirs, you have until September 30th. And I'm proud to say that we are at more than 86% complete.
Wonderful.
Yeah, we have over a 68% self-response rate. And then we have we're getting close to 20% additional households that have been enumerated by the census workers that are knocking on doors through September 30th. So we are in the top 5 states in the country in terms of census response. I just returned from a visit to a recovery facility in Hartford where people can go if they are suffering from opioid addiction. This week, we are celebrating Addiction Awareness Week. So, and during COVID-19, sadly, we've seen a spike in addiction and overdose deaths in our state, unfortunately, a spike of 22% because people are feeling stressed and people are feeling isolated. So I on any given day, I usually am traveling to several cities or towns. Yesterday, I was in Kent, Connecticut to do a roundtable on opioid addiction, a focus of our activities this week. Also, I have been visiting small businesses that have been affected by COVID-19 and have received money from either the federal government or the state government to find out how the PPP and the HEDCO loan programs are working. And I will say it's inspiring to see so many great women and minority-owned businesses in our state. So I'm just very impressed with how creative people have been in this new normal that we're living.
And I think people have had to be, because there's no question that there's been a devastating impact upon all of us in just about every way that you could possibly think of. And so I appreciate, and I know others do too, that not only do you have the awareness of that, but you're actually going to some of these sites and visiting with people, because I think when you have nothing else, you want to have hope. And that, I believe, does in fact give people some level of hope.
And we have been trying also, Adrienne, to highlight the availability of testing because the governor and I thought it was really important that people, particularly in communities of color, have access
Yes.
to testing. So we visited community health centers, we visited pop-up testing sites, we visited the Cornell Scott Hill Health Center as an example. We've been to every urban area to try to highlight how easy it is to get tested, that it's free, because that's been key to keeping our infection rate very low. And I raise this again, Adrienne, only because you mentioned back to school. We've got young people coming to colleges because we have some great public and private universities here. And
Absolutely.
we're finding that as young people come in to attend college, that they're bringing COVID with them. And so fortunately, because we have this very robust testing program and protocols in place to try to keep people safe, that you know, we've identified new cases. At the same time, while we have an uptick, we don't have a surge, because
Right.
we are doing the contact tracing and keeping people quarantined so that we can keep folks safe. So that's been, I have to say, public safety has been at the top of our agenda, public health and safety, because you can't have economic recovery. You can't reopen your economy
That's
until
right.
it's safe. So
That's right.
that's
That's
been,
right.
I would say, if I had to say this year, our biggest challenge. And
Yes.
the other thing I would mention as far as challenges, because I see it in your background, is this surge in interest in racial justice.
Absolutely.
So that's been inspiring.
Well, thank you. And we're going to talk about that in just a second, but I wanted to ask you about this, or give you an opportunity to address this. So one of the first things that Governor Lamont did when he took office was create the Council on Women and Girls. And we were all so excited about that and very grateful, and appoint you as chair. Another reason to also be very, very excited. And I'm very honored to serve on one of the subcommittees, but I would like to know if you could talk about what some of the priorities have been for perhaps those who don't know about this work that is happening, and maybe what has been accomplished thus far, and what are your thoughts and feelings?
Sure. Well, I'll tell your listeners sort of how we came to put this council together. So one of the many reasons that I admired President Barack Obama is he had a cabinet level council to advance the interests of women and girls.
Yes.
And Governor Cuomo loved the idea and created one at the state level. So the governor and I, when we were in our transition period, after we won in November of 2019, as we were getting ready to take office in January, our transition team suggested, and we thought it was a great idea, that we establish a Council on Women and Girls in Connecticut. And it is comprised of every one of our cabinet secretaries. So all of our 27 commissioners, be they leaders of the Housing Commission, the banking office, the Office of Public Health, Veterans Affairs. Every one of our cabinet secretaries are on the council. And as you know, Adrienne, because you've been to our meetings, you know that we have one of the most diverse cabinet that we've appointed. About half women.
I agree. Yes.
40% people of color. And so the idea of the council was to have us meet regularly to talk about how in each of each agency of state government, we can advance the interests of women and girls. And if we have these agencies working together, we will be able to do that most effectively. So the council advocated to increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour, which was key to helping 170,000 families led by women who are minimum wage earners to lift them up. We also advocated for paid family and medical leave.
Yes.
We were able to pass one of the strongest laws in the country. And we've been doing a lot of fun projects, like we launched the Lieutenant Governor's Coding Challenge for young people. And we were thrilled that more than 50% of the participants, and there were over 500 of them, were girls, because we think if we are going to address pay equity, we have to get more young women and girls interested in computer science and math and technology. And we're looking forward to partnering with the YWCA and the Girl Scouts of Connecticut to expand that. The governor and I were thrilled that 500 students, we announced this initiative and this challenge to students in May, maybe a month before school ended. And we were thrilled that so many young people came forward, and they had these great ideas about computer apps to deal with COVID-19. So one high school student from Ridgefield put every testing site on a website so people could easily see where to go and what time.
That's wonderful.
Yep. Another student, and I love this one, came up with a website for middle schoolers to use if they got bored. What were fun art projects or craft projects that they could do at home if, once they finished their schoolwork. So there were a lot of really great COVID-19 related ideas. So that's just another thing that the council's done. And I'll mention one final project. Pay equity is a real focus of ours. And we worked with the state controller's office to start at home. Let's look at the salaries of people in state government to see if there was a gender pay gap. And interestingly, this was very interesting, we found that white women made dollar for dollar what white men made in our state government. And I think that's largely because of union activity that, the unions advocate for men and women. We found that Black women were making 90 cents on the dollar compared to white men, which is interesting because if you look in the private sector, they're not doing as well. So we also found that there is more work to do. And, for instance, why is it that those who do maintenance work, who are mainly men, make more than, say, a female paraprofessional at a school? So there's more work that we need to do to address disparities in some pay groups. But we thought if we want the private sector to start focusing, we need to look at ourselves first. So those are
Absolutely.
some examples of things we've been doing with the council. And one of the things we really appreciate is partnering with some of our organizations like the Y, like the Girl Scouts, like the Connecticut Women's Educational and Legal Fund. We have over
Yes.
100 organizations that work with us, and they really bring a lot to what we do.
Well, and that is so important. And I think I certainly can speak on behalf of the YWCA Hartford region in terms of how we've been very pleased, not only with the initiatives, but recognizing that our voices are actually being heard at the table. And so that's much appreciated. I want to talk about something else, though, that you've done. In June, the Council's Economic Opportunity and Workforce Equity Subcommittee launched an initiative to provide the latest financial literacy news and tools to help women, and all Connecticut residents actually, with financial planning. Could you please talk a little bit about that program and why you think it's important?
Well, and it's interesting because I know that the YWCA has for years done so much education around financial literacy because it gives women and families financial security. And we wanted to make that a big part of our economic and workforce development agenda. And we felt that there were many state agencies that did something on financial literacy. Like, we were so amazed as the leaders on our council talked with one another. You know, Department of Banking does that. The Controller's Office does some of that. The Treasurer's Office does that. Consumer Protection. So we decided to put together a financial literacy portal to take all of those state resources and put them together in one place so people didn't have to go hopscotching hither, thither, and yon, to put all the best information together. And it's a tremendous resource, particularly now when families are stressed. We have so much unemployment, and I know that young people, you know, and families are getting nervous about paying for college. These are, or planning for retirement. These are the resources that families can use to help their kids get introduced to financial literacy, to plan for college, plan for retirement. And I hope people will take advantage of that financial literacy portal, because we literally had some of the best brains in state government pulling all that together.
And certainly we hope so too, because as you said, it's critical. It is absolutely critical. So now we'll switch gears, a little more somber topic. And as you know, the YWCA nationally, but certainly in the Hartford region, is dedicated to eliminating racism and empowering women, also dedicated to racial and gender equity. And of course, we will all disheartened and shocked by the events this summer, particularly with the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, so many before them, and unfortunately even after. You reached out to us to join a peaceful rally that we were putting together along with some of our partners and other organizations. And you particularly wanted to join the procession that actually started at Hopewell Baptist Church. And it was going from Hopewell Baptist Church in Windsor to the state capitol. And you came on site, and you and I chatted. You walked around and chatted with others. I think you were appropriately and equally as outraged as was everyone else. But I wonder, when you reached out, and we really appreciated that and said, you know, I feel like I want and need to be a part of this. What was in your mind? And maybe more importantly, what was in your heart?
you know, I don't think anyone could look at that video of George Floyd's murder and feel anything but outrage and just this sense of enough. And we just have to do something, and we have to do it now. And it was just this pivotal moment where people all over the country and all over our state, in every kind of community, that's what struck me, was, you know, Glastonbury or little towns like Durham or Suffield had rallies on their town green and protests that were very peaceful. But in some homogeneous communities, I went to these rallies and ceremonies in very wealthy suburban communities, but also in places like Meriden or Middletown or Bloomfield, Windsor. And to me, what I thought was most important was people of all ages and backgrounds standing up to say, we just are not tolerating this, and we have to do something, and it has to be productive, and it has to be now. And I believe that what naturally happened in our state, and thank God in our state, it was by and large extremely peaceful, right?
Yes.
People didn't get hurt. It was, but people showed, they showed their feelings. They said what they wanted to see. And as a result, I think all of that resulted in the passing of a very historic police accountability and transparency bill that is a model. And I have to say that it has some very common sense things in it, like racial sensitivity training, like recruiting more people of color and women into law enforcement. And I do believe that, and it doesn't change federal law, which there's been federal civil rights law that's been around for 50 years that says that police officers are only personally responsible if they act in a way that is willful, wanton, and malicious. So, you know, I know there are some members of the law enforcement community that didn't like the bill, but in my estimation, if you do your job in law enforcement and you do it well, you have nothing to worry about. And there's nothing in that bill that already wasn't ensconced in federal civil rights law. So we made some major strides forward, requiring body cams, requiring very simple things like that people who are in law enforcement have their name plate or on their and their badge, so people can see their name and who they are. I mean, it's just very simple but important and powerful things, which we hope are going to keep everybody safer. And now for us in our state, and we need to do this, we need more police accountability at the national level. And we need to start addressing the structural racism which COVID-19 has laid bare in healthcare, in education, in workforce,
economics, everything, in everything.
Every aspect, housing, every aspect of our society. And what was very interesting was in the legislature, I know that legislators feel, as the governor and I do, that we've got to address all of these things and we've got to do it sooner rather than later. So one of the things that the governor has asked me to do is to lead the long-term economic recovery committees in our state. And so each of our municipalities have been asked to create a long-term economic recovery committee and to put people on those local committees that represent the diversity of each community. So,
Oh, that's important. Yes.
yep. So
Very.
Chamber of Commerce and business leaders, labor leaders, faith leaders, nonprofit leaders, immigrant groups, whatever is representative of the community should be part of that, because the goal of these recovery committees is not to get our economy back to what it was on March 15th. No, the goal is to build it back even better so that these issues around educational inequality, housing inequality, healthcare inequality are all addressed in a meaningful way that is accessible to each community. And so I say to many people who were involved in these protests and vigils, go talk to your mayor or your first selectman and tell them you want to be part of the conversation, that you'd like to be on one of these local recovery committees, because that is going to be boots on the ground way to help your community be more equitable in every aspect of your community life. And I also tell people, remember, we've got an election coming up on November. Please register, please vote.
Yes.
And of course, please fill out your census.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're right. And so speaking of election, and certainly arguably we are in the middle of one of the most critical and important presidential elections of our lifetime. And certainly history is being made with the selection of the first woman of color as a vice presidential candidate on the Democratic ticket, running with Joe Biden. Could you talk to us a little bit about what your thoughts and feelings are and how you felt when you heard that Kamala Harris was going to be on the ticket with Joe Biden?
I had a lot of favorites, but she was my favorite. First of all, I'll say there were so many great women that were on the list of those being considered. People like Pamela Bass, who leads the Black Caucus. People like Susan Rice.
Absolutely.
Former UN ambassador. There were women governors that were mentioned that have been doing a great job. Val Demings, former police chief and now member of Congress, all like fabulous women. There was an embarrassment of riches. But what I love about Kamala Harris is that she is someone who I feel is ready on day one to be the president. And you need that in a number two. I've found that in my job as lieutenant governor, right? Somebody's got to be ready to step in.
That's right.
To do the job if called. And Kamala, as Attorney General of California, was someone who ran one of the biggest law firms in the country, if you will. And she showed that she was unafraid to stand up to big banks, to mortgage companies. She's somebody who stood up for marriage equality. She's just a fighter. And so she showed me that she had the executive experience to lead a big government agency, which you need.
That's right.
President of the United States. And also she showed that she has the legislative experience that you need to be effective as president as well, because I've seen her go toe to toe with Brett Kavanaugh when she's asking questions on the Judiciary Committee. So I thought she was a great choice. I'll be honest, I was a little concerned about some of the people who are mentioned, not because they're not experienced and talented, but I think you need someone who's been vetted by the voters of a state. And she's shown that multiple times running for Attorney General and the US Senate. So
Absolutely.
you know, I'm really, really excited about her candidacy. At the same time, you know, she was the nominee for about 2 minutes when then you started having questions raised about her citizenship.
Yeah, here we go again.
Right. And we know what this is. We've seen this before. This is racist. This is sexist. You know, there were remarks about, oh, she's too ambitious. You know, this is what we say about strong, powerful women. And we have to, I think, call that out. You know, and I think Kamala's going to do a great job as a candidate. And I think I can't wait to see a debate between her and Mike Pence.
Oh my, I'm certain that's going to be interesting. I've been heartened though that women have stood up en masse and said, you know what, we're not going to tolerate the name calling. We're not going to tolerate, oh, she's aggressive, or oh, she may want to do more than just say whatever you say, Mr. President. Well, I hope that she would say, if elected, do much more than just say whatever you say, Mr. President. And we really have to stop thinking of women as window dressing and understanding that the power and the ability of women to galvanize, mobilize, and lead. And you certainly epitomize that, Lieutenant Governor. We appreciate that so much. In that same vein, you know, yesterday we just celebrated Women's Equality Day. And of course, that commemorates the 1920 adoption of the 19th Amendment and giving some women, of course, the right to vote. And of course, we know that we had to wait 45 years later for people of color, women of color, to have the opportunity to vote with the passage of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. I know that voting is near and dear to you, and I have a quote here that you once said, registering people to vote is not a partisan activity. Absolutely. So what's your advice to encourage people to vote and to actually participate in this democracy? And for those that are not yet old enough to vote, what can they do to help in their community to encourage others to vote?
Well, first of all, I would say to anyone who is 18 or going to be 18 by November 3rd to please, if you have not registered to vote, it's very easy. You can download the form from the Secretary of the State's website and send it into your town hall, and start making a plan to vote, because this is a very unique time to be voting. The Secretary of the State in our state of Connecticut, between September 8th and September 11th, will be mailing to every registered voter in our state an absentee ballot application, so that people don't have to choose between their health and voting.
Yes.
The two-step process. You have to fill out the ballot application, and then you will receive your ballot. And you've got to make sure you get that ballot back. And you know, we're in the midst of this time where people are questioning the efficiency of the post office. So
Right.
if you have any doubt about whether your ballot's going to get to your elections official on time, please, you can put it in the mail, or you can take that ballot right to your town hall and put it in the special ballot boxes with the state of Connecticut seal on it. And if you have any questions after you drop it off, please call your town clerk and ask him or her whether they have indeed received your ballot. That will give you peace of mind that you know your ballot will be counted. It's such an important time, not just for the presidential election, but we have U.S. Congress on the ballot, our
That's
legislators, senator, state representative, probate judge, registrar of voters. Those are important offices. They are on the ballot. And, you know, think about how long it took. So it took white women until 1920, 100 years of struggle to get there. And then it took women of color and people of color another almost 5 decades to get, as you mentioned, passage of the Civil Rights Act where everyone could vote. And I think, you know, it's time to reflect on, yes, the milestones, but to see how much more we have to do. So I would say to people, you know, if you're not old enough to register to vote, volunteer and help a candidate that embodies the change that you want to see. Are you concerned about climate change? Do you want to see pay equity? Are you concerned about the Russians sabotaging our election system? Whatever it is that is your issue, educate yourself about candidates, help the candidates that want to do some of the things that you'd like to see, and help them and remind everyone in your community to vote, because literally our lives depend on it. I mean,
absolutely.
Today I read that the Center for Disease Control is now saying that if you're asymptomatic for COVID, that you never need to get tested again.
That's insane.
Yeah,
it's insane.
So our public health commissioner, Deidre Gifford, disagrees and is advocating for continued testing. If you feel sick, if you've been around someone who's gotten sick, you know, we need to do that. So everything, the health of our country is on the ballot.
That's right.
Women's health care is on the ballot. The Supreme Court's on the ballot. So please, 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 young people, I was so inspired to see your participation. Let's not let up, and let's participate and make sure that everybody's voice gets heard.
And that's it. It's so concerning to me. I hear about or think about people who might say, well, my vote doesn't matter. Or, and again, the absentee ballot is an absolute alternative to saying, I'm a little nervous about going to a polling place. You know, I'm not comfortable with that, but it just so much concerns me that if people don't exercise this right, that was so hard fought for.
And it really was. And I do want to say, because in my other role as Secretary of the State, and being the person who moved us from being a state that used those old-fashioned lever voting machines to a paper ballot, know that yes, your vote will be counted, and that the people in the polling places keep track of who has voted, whether in person or by absentee, and every vote is counted, and no vote can ever be lost because the ballots are saved. So there is literally a paper record of every person's vote. And that's actually what sold me on the optical scan type voting machines, because you could always do a hand count. And indeed, we do that in every election in randomly chosen polling locations to make sure that votes are counted accurately. So we do it right in Connecticut, and just make sure. And also, I just want to say that I know lots of people who voted in person. My family and I voted by absentee. But for the people who went in person, they were impressed with how the voting booths were set up in a socially distant way. There was PPE, there was hand sanitizer, and it was very well thought out. So however you choose to vote, know that it's safe and it's really important.
It is. It's absolutely critical. Thank you so much. So I want to switch topics yet again. So we just described, you described earlier what a busy, almost non-ending day must look like. And we know that we're all experiencing this, being in this state, you know, at this particular time. If you're working from home, working somewhere virtually, it's like the day doesn't really end. It's like the weeks. What's a weekend? All the days feel like it's all. But self-care becomes so critical, and particularly for we as women who are the nurturers and feel like we have to carry all of the weight, and sometimes realistically circumstances dictate that we must. What for you constitutes taking care of self and practicing a little self-care?
Well, I love cooking. So, you know, I've been enjoying using the tomatoes and peppers and squash and veggies from my garden. So I love doing that. And actually, that's part of the COVID epidemic that I've liked, that I've been able to cook more. Also, one thing my husband and I do every day is we go for a 5-mile walk. Our neighbors, I'm sure, think we're nuts because we're usually out when it's dark outside. By the time we get to that, it could be 9 or 10 o'clock. But we do that regularly, and it's a really, in my mind, an important mental health break, and also a time that I get to catch up with my husband about everything he's going through in his day and our family is going through. So dinner and a walk with my husband are my favorite parts of the day.
That is wonderful. And we do want to remind everyone that this is YWLIVE Lunch and Learn with Lieutenant Governor Susan Bysiewicz. And to give you an opportunity for any questions that you might have, give the Lieutenant Governor an opportunity to hear from you. Please do so now. Thank you so much. So while we're waiting and for a question or two to roll in, and as we enter our last few minutes of our conversation, our YWCA Young Women's Leadership Corps, YWLC as we call it, recently ended the Summer Institute, and we had 32 remarkable young ladies between the ages of 12 and 18. They were fabulous. They were just fabulous. And they participated in personal development, professional development. This year, we introduced, with the help of Melinda Johnson, who is our fabulous Director of Community Engagement and Advocacy, and Donna Shotopo, who is our Chief Programs Officer here, an Advocacy Academy. And we thought this is a great way to teach at a very young age how you advocate for self. You do it, after all, in your home, I'm sure, when you're asking a parent for permission for something. You do it in your school, how to do it in your community, ultimately to do it in your state, and then to even think about, you know what, I may want to run for office, you know, at some point, or hold someone accountable that has. What would you like to share if you had those 32 young women in front of you, and hoping that maybe some of them, if not all of them, are watching today, Lieutenant Governor? What would be the best advice you ever received, and what little tidbit would you like to share with them?
Oh my goodness. Well, there's so many things that I would like to share about leadership, and I want to thank the Y for focusing on that. Girl Scouts of Connecticut does the same thing. And it's a way to teach young women to be future leaders. So what I would say is this, do whatever you're passionate about, you know, whatever it is. You know, there may be an issue, maybe it's the environment, maybe it's a talent that you have. You're an artist, you're a musician, whatever it is that you love that doesn't seem like work should be what you should focus on. And because I have a lot of women who want to be in politics and they say, well, what should I study? And my response is always, whatever you're interested in, because each of us brings to public service what we're passionate about. And never be afraid to speak truth to power.
Yes, that's right.
Feel fierce. There are so many, it's one of the great things that I admire about a Kamala Harris, for example, is when she sees something wrong, she speaks up. So if you see something in your school, in your community, in our state that you think is wrong, stand up and say something about it. And places like the Y, the Girl Scouts, teach young women how to then go about addressing some of the inequalities or the inequities that they see in a very positive way. I've seen amazing gold projects that girls work on in Girl Scouts. And you could probably talk about the folks who are in your advocacy academy, because those are ways to develop some of the skills that you need, interpersonal skills. Maybe it's public speaking, all kinds of research, talking to people who are working on issues that you care about. And the other thing that I would say is to find a mentor or a role model, and maybe you'll be an intern. You could come to the General Assembly and be an intern. We have 5 or 6 interns every semester in our Lieutenant Governor's office. And, interns that I've had who've worked with me either in the legislature or Secretary of the State are now elected officials themselves, which is so
a fantastic opportunity. Learn and grow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Look for those volunteer opportunities.
So here is a question for you, Lieutenant Governor. So I understand that one of your role models was the former Governor, Ella Grasso. And of course, who was the first woman elected governor in the state and the first woman governor elected in her own right in the country. What do you imagine that she might say if she were looking at women in politics today?
She would have said, number one, because she predicted we'd have a woman president. Why haven't we had one yet? I know she'd say that. And, in 1974, she was the first woman governor elected in her own right in our whole country. And I think she'd look around and she'd say, okay, well, there are 9 women governors across the country, but, there should be at least 25. And I was in Congress when I was only one of a handful in, the early 70s, late 60s. Why are there only 101 in the U.S. Congress right now? Yes. And she'd look at our legislature and say, why do we only have 26% of women members of the General Assembly? Why aren't there 50% or 51%? So that's, I think she'd be disappointed that only one other woman, Jody Rell, has been governor since she left office.
So as we wrap up, and we're so grateful for your time today, I'd like to invite you, hopefully your schedule will permit, on September 9th, we will be celebrating 25 years in the company of women, although virtually. We have Cecile Richards, there it is.
Wow, look at that.
Who's going to be joining us, of course, virtually. I had the pleasure of having a wonderful interview with her. So we invite the listening public, anyone within the sound of my voice, and certainly you, Lieutenant Governor, to join us for this very inspirational event, 1 hour.
Oh, I would look
And,
forward to it. Cecile Richards and her mom. I'm a fan of Cecile and her mother, Anne. I had the pleasure of meeting in person, was a great inspiration to me. I enjoyed so much going to the YWCA lunches over the years with, 2,000 powerful women. I'm going to miss the in-person, but maybe next year, but I'll be there.
Fingers crossed. We thank you so very much, and thank you so much for joining us. And I'm Adrienne Cochrane, the Chief Executive Officer of the YWCA Hartford region. We invite everybody to stay encouraged and stay safe. And thank you. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
It absolutely.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.